Hello and welcome to the AnVIL. This video is an overview of the user journey when submitting data to AnVIL on GCP. AnVIL data in GCP will reside in the Teradata repository, or TDR. The Teradata repository is designed to make a more fair data storage solution. Fair data are fungible, accessible, designed to work with a range of operating systems or platforms, and reproducible. Fair features of TDR include the following. TDR enables reproducible analysis with static data releases. TDR is versatile, with a fine-grained organization of the data. Data is more searchable. The data repository allows faceted, index search across datasets. Access controls are more granular. The Data Explorer includes built-in subsetting functionality to share exactly the right data subsets with distinct collaborators. Data access is streamlined via integration with duos. Storing datasets in TDR saves money. Data snapshots avoid creating and paying to store extra copies of the large primary data files. And the data repository has better mechanisms for tracking and versioning, including consent withdrawals. Finding data in AnVIL. New AnVIL Data Explorer lets users search for exactly the data they need. It allows faceted index searches across datasets for custom building cohorts. Searches leverage access controls built into TDR and EBGAP or duos. Keywords and conditions for searching and filtering are on the left of the Explorer. Using common ontologies helps harmonize datasets and enables cross-dataset searches. Here's an expanded view of the reported ethnicity group from the left column. TDR displays a list in the center of the page of which datasets are available based on the selected criteria. Users can easily see which datasets they're granted access to and which they can apply to for access. Data submitters can subset and share parts or all of the dataset with distinct collaborators. Duos integration enforces authorization. The current submission process for TDR is designed to be as similar as possible to the previous process where data was stored in AnVIL workspaces. Here is a summary of the differences. In the workspace model, datasets are stored and managed in individual release workspaces. Users access the datasets through these AnVIL workspaces. In the new framework, datasets in TDR reference data files stored in AnVIL deposit workspaces that are accessed as snapshots through TDR. Previously, datasets were discoverable using the AnVIL dataset catalog or My Workspaces in Terra. In TDR, data will be more visible and findable through the AnVIL Data Explorer. Access control of data in workspaces is still managed using workspace authorization domains. Once in TDR, access controls are assigned to the dataset and subsets and follow the data as it moves to other locations. For example, cloning a snapshot in a workspace assigns the data control requirements to the workspace. Deposit workspaces include a simplified folder hierarchy structure. This will be covered in an upcoming slide. And finally, while dataset workspaces included dataset attributes, TDR will include a more efficient method of capturing your important data attributes and metadata using a new minimal recommended data model. Let's cover a typical data submission journey from start to finish. This is a high-level overview of the typical TDR data submission process. Before submitting to AnVIL, you will first create your data model. The data model outlines the tables that will hold your data and metadata and how they are related. Next, you prepare your data, making sure all data files conform to AnVIL naming standards and generating TSVs for each table in the data model. Once you've gotten approval from the AnVIL to host your data, you'll stage and QC the data in an AnVIL submission workspace, also called the deposit workspace. Each consent group has its own submission workspace. Next, you'll ingest data from the deposit workspace into TDR by running a workflow. You can clean up the deposit workspace if you want. Once the data is ingested into the TDR dataset, you can create snapshots for researchers to analyze. Submitting additional data follows the same flow. You'll submit new data to a new deposit workspace. Then ingest the data to an existing dataset and create new snapshots for researchers to analyze. Before we go through data submission and release, let's go over snapshot access permissions. For purposes of permissions, you'll use a different deposit workspace for each FIS ID. Snapshots are created with data access controls for the following groups. AnVIL admins are the custodians. The PIs are the PIs designated data submitters or tier group or readers. AnVIL developers, everyone on the dbGaP access list, and the duos group, which is added during the data release, are also readers. Snapshots can be shared with read access, no sharing, and compute off or lock permission. Note that data will be protected when it's shared. AnVIL applies access permissions automatically wherever the data resides when a snapshot is imported to a workspace. We'll now go step by step through the release process for AnVIL on GCP. Note the colors of this image and the relationship between the groups in the upcoming slides. Grey is the activity of the data submitter. Orange is dbGaP. Blue is the AnVIL ingestion team. And purple is the data user. The submission process assumes the AnVIL review board has approved the study to be hosted in AnVIL through dbGaP. For new projects that have not yet been approved, data submitters should complete an AnVIL onboarding application. In the first 3 steps, you work with dbGaP. The journey starts when you reach out to dbGaP to register the study. The registration process requires approval by the Genomic Program Administrator or GPA. Registration may take several months. Registration is complete once the GPA has signed off on the study and the status is completed by GPA. At this point, the consent groups have been assigned, which is required for data submission to AnVIL. This is the point where you would reach out to AnVIL to start data ingestion. You'll contact the AnVIL support team of the completed registration. Collaborate with AnVIL to upload data through an open Sendist ticket or by sending an email to anvil-data@broadinstitute.org to generate a Sendist ticket for tracking and coordinating the next steps through the lifetime of the release. Data submitters are responsible for preparing, staging, and ingesting data to TED inside a submission workspace. We'll go over detailed steps for the ingestion process in the next section. After data ingestion, AnVIL tells you that the data are released and coordinates any data cleanups. Last but not least is the data release to users on the portal. Datasets are indexed and will be available in the Data Explorer on a quarterly basis. Early access is through duos. The next slides will focus on the 4 main data ingestion steps. These are performed by data submitters with the help of the AnVIL ingestion team. To start, you will define the data model, format all file names and metadata correctly and prepare the data for ingestion. Stage and QC the data in an AnVIL submission workspace. And finally, ingest into TDR. Once the data submitters and dbGaP sign off, the AnVIL team releases the data to the research community. Let's go through the data submitters ingestion process in detail. Once you notify AnVIL that the GPA has signed off on the study, you will begin staging and ingesting the data in a deposit workspace. Before you start, you will define the data model or schema for your data set. Your data model is a set of tables that contain or reference all the tabular data, like clinical or lab data, and large unstructured data files, like CRAMs and BAMs. This simple data model includes 3 tables of data: donors, biosamples, and files. Each row in a table is a unique entity and each column is a different attribute or kind of data. Associated data in different tables is linked by way of the key ID. For example, the biosample table includes a donor ID column. To link it to the appropriate data in the donor table. Once you specify the data model, you'll prepare the data to upload to the AnVIL submission workspace. You'll make sure all files conform to AnVIL formatting and naming requirements. For example, all object file names, such as CRAMs and BAMs, must contain only number, letters, colons, dashes, and underscores. Special characters or spaces cannot be used in any field or file name. If you store your large unstructured data, such as CRAMs, in the AnVIL submission workspace, you will only reference the file name in your TSV file. For DAuthn and external storage, use the full path in TSVs. Note that most data submitters will store data in the submission workspace, where AnVIL pays for cloud storage. Last, you will generate a TSV file for each table in your data model. You can save existing tabular data as a TSV file and create new spreadsheets or TSV files to hold metadata for large data files in Google Cloud Storage. You'll find links to examples and templates in the Terra support documentation. Next up, we'll go over how to stage the data in a deposit workspace. The AnVIL team will create the deposit workspace, confirm the data submitters, and grant access. You'll set up subfolders if needed to help organize data in the deposit workspace directory. For example, a data files folder for storing CRAMs and BAMs. Once the deposit workspace is set up, you'll upload the large data object files using the tool of your choice. You'll just need to verify that the upload created an MD5 hash. Files smaller than 3 GB can use the upload button right in the workspace. For large numbers or files greater than about 3 GB, use gcloud storage commands in a command line interface. Once you've uploaded your large data files, you'll upload all tabular data TSVs. Uploading the TSVs as workspace tables ensures they have the correct format. As a last step before ingesting the data to TDR, you'll create a data dictionary from the data model to use as input for a QC workflow to validate the data. The QC workflow checks the data in the workspace tables and storage bucket against the data dictionary. It will add QC columns that can be checked against the expected values. You'll correct the errors and iterate the process to remove all the flags. When you have everything staged, you're ready to ingest the data from the deposit workspace to TDR. If your data is stored in an external bucket or a different Terra workspace, you will need to give TDR permission to read from the bucket. Most submitters will be storing data in the AnVIL deposit workspace and can skip this step. Then you'll push all the data to TDR. You can verify the data set in TDR once it's complete. If you choose, you can use the cleanup staging workspace workflow to remove files that are not being referenced by the TDR dataset. Let's clarify the deposit workspace access controls. AnVIL admins have admin permission. The Is are designated data submitters, or writers on the deposit workspace by default. Some caveats on securing controlled data on GCP. AnVIL deposit workspaces are protected with authorization domains that provide security and log S data access required per NIH security policy. Here are some best practices for using the deposit workspace. All data submitters are expected to abide by the following guidelines. Only upload data that applies to the current approved data submission. Only upload data within the data size limit approved by the AnVIL program, and release data in a timely manner per NIH GDS guidelines. Without express written permission from AnVIL, you cannot egress data from the deposit workspace. Cloning the deposit workspace is also not allowed because at this time, access to data tables will not be protected in clones. Once you've ingested the data in the submission workspace to TDR, you will contact the AnVIL team to release the data. The AnVIL support team will send you a checklist for sign-off. This is an example of the content we'll seek. Confirm AnVIL is an external data source on each FIS ID. Confirm there is no personal health information in the dataset. Review and confirm the accuracy of the deposit workspace data, as well as the FIS ID, consent code and data types. The team will also make sure all data tables are present and accurate. In addition to the checklist, you'll complete a summary table shown at the bottom of this slide and designate a person to confirm that the dataset is complete and can be released. This acts as a final signature. Note that snapshots are immutable. Making changes after release will require a new snapshot or version update. Once the final sign-off is received, the AnVIL ingestion team proceeds with the release of the data. To release the data, the AnVIL ingestion team first creates a snapshot of the data. AnVIL ingestion team then coordinates with dbGaP to establish access controls. AnVIL ingestion team takes care of a number of details. Reach out to the phenotype curator at dbGaP to change the status of the study to released. The data submitter will be included on emails sent to dbGaP. Link dbGaP data access list to a dbGaP Terra group and add the Terra group to the snapshot. Ensure the DO's ID is added to the snapshot. Lock the snapshot so no one may add, delete or modify data. And finally, add a release tag to the snapshot, which will signal adding it to the catalogue. At this point, THE dataset will appear on the AnVIL Data Explorer. Once the dataset is released, AnVIL will notify you that it's available to the research community for access requests through dbGaP. This wraps up the presentation of the data submission process. If you have any questions, please reach out to the AnVIL team at anvil-data@broadinstitute.org. Thank you for watching.